I still smell it sometimes before it comes back to me, the sweetness of overripe apples mixed with iron and damp earth. It arrives without warning, usually at night, usually when the city outside my apartment window goes quiet enough that I can almost pretend I am back there. Back in Freidorf, back when it was still half a village pretending to be a neighborhood, and I was a child pretending not to be afraid. The memory begins with a hook, sharp as a nail driven into the skull. 7 men in yellow, laid out like offerings, their mouths open as if they had been trying to sing. I was 8 years old when they found them. I am 46 now, and I have never truly left that house. Freidorf in the 1980s was a place the city forgot. Timișoara ended somewhere near the tram depot, and after that the roads grew narrow, uneven, more dust than asphalt. Our houses leaned into each other like old women gossiping, their plaster peeling, their gardens fenced with rusted wire and prayer. Chickens wandered freely. Dogs slept in the shade of walnut trees. At night, the darkness was thick enough to feel like fabric brushing against your skin. People say now that Freidorf has always been marginal, but that isn't true. It became marginal. Once, it was a village, proud and self-contained, settled by Swabians long before my grandparents were born. Even in the 80s, traces of that life clung to it. Cellars dug deep into the soil, barns converted into kitchens, wells that no one trusted but everyone still used. And houses. So many houses that didn't quite belong to the present. The yellow house was one of them. It stood at the far edge of Freidorf, where the fields began and the road narrowed into a dirt track that flooded every spring. No one remembered exactly who had built it. Some said a German family before the war. Others said it had been abandoned, taken over, abandoned again. Its walls were painted a sickly yellow that peeled in long strips, like skin after a burn. The windows were always dark, even at noon, and the garden had grown wild, nettles as tall as a man, an apple tree bent under the weight of fruit no one ever picked. We were told not to go near it. So of course, we did. In the summer of 1984, Freidorf was suffocating. The heat pressed down on us, heavy and unrelenting, and the air smelled of dust and sweat and manure. Electricity cuts were frequent. Water sometimes stopped running without warning. Adults whispered more than usual, their conversations dropping into silence when children approached. My mother worked at the factory in the city and came home exhausted, her hands rough, her face permanently tightened by worry. My father drank more than he spoke. At night, I lay in bed listening to the sounds of Freidorf, dogs barking at nothing, trains groaning in the distance, the wind moving through cornfields like a slow breath. That was when the dream started. I dreamed of yellow. Not bright yellow, not the color of sunflowers or school chalk. This was a deeper shade, old and dirty, like walls that had absorbed decades of smoke and secrets. In the dreams, I stood in a room painted that color, barefoot on cold earth, while voices murmured around me in a language I didn't understand. Sometimes there were hands on my shoulders, gentle but firm. Sometimes there was singing. I never saw faces. When I woke up, my nightgown would be damp with sweat and my mouth tasted of metal. I didn't tell anyone. Children in Freidorf learned early what not to say. It was my friend Anka who dared me to go into the yellow house. Anka lived 2 streets over, in a low house with a grapevine climbing the front wall. She was fearless in the way only children can be, convinced that danger was something that happened to other people. We spent our days riding battered bicycles, stealing cherries, and inventing stories about the places adults avoided. "They say it's haunted," she told me one afternoon, pointing toward the yellow house with her chin. They say lots of things, I replied, though my stomach tightened. They say people go in and don't come out. That's stupid, she grinned. Then come with me. We went at dusk, when the heat finally loosened its grip and the shadows grew long. The grass around the house was waist-high, buzzing with insects. Up close, the paint smelled sour, like old urine and mold. The front door hung crookedly on its hinges, a dark gap yawning behind it. See, Anka said, nothing. She stepped inside before I could stop her. I followed, my heart pounding so loudly I was sure she could hear it. The air inside was cool and damp. The floor was packed earth, uneven, with roots breaking through in places. The walls were indeed yellow, darker inside than out, stained in irregular patches. There was no furniture, no curtains, no sign of life, only the faint smell of apples. We explored one room, then another. The house was larger than it looked from the outside, the rooms connected in odd angles, as if it had been expanded without a plan. In the back, there was a door leading down. A cellar. The stairs creaked under our weight. Halfway down, Anka stopped. Do you hear that? She whispered. At first, I heard nothing, then a low hum, almost below hearing, like a distant engine or a chant heard through walls. We should have run. Instead, we went down. The cellar was wide and circular, its walls reinforced with old bricks. The ceiling was low, supported by thick wooden beams blackened with age. Candles stood in niches along the walls, unlit, their wax melted into thick, uneven drips. In the center of the room was a symbol scratched into the dirt floor. I didn't know then what it meant. I only knew it made my head hurt to look at it. The humming grew louder. It wasn't coming from the room itself, but from somewhere beyond it, through a narrow passage at the back, partially hidden by a hanging cloth. Anka reached for it. That was when the singing started. Voices rose together, deep and steady, male voices harmonizing in a way that felt practiced, ritualized. The language was unfamiliar, harsh consonants, drawn-out vowels, but the rhythm was hypnotic. I felt my feet moving forward without my permission. We pushed the cloth aside. The room beyond was lit by candlelight. 7 men stood in a circle, their backs to us. They were all dressed the same. Yellow shirts, yellow trousers, yellow cloth wrapped around their heads. The color was brighter here, almost glowing in the dim light. In the center of the circle, something knelt. I couldn't see it clearly at first. Only a shape, small and hunched. A child. My breath caught in my throat. One of the men turned his head slightly, and I saw his face in profile. His eyes were closed. His lips moved with the chant. His expression was peaceful. None of them noticed us. The chanting grew louder, faster. The men began to sway, their movements synchronized. The child in the center rocked back and forth, whimpering. Anka squeezed my hand so hard it hurt. I don't like this, she whispered. Neither did I, but my legs wouldn't move. One of the men stepped forward, raising a knife. Its blade caught the candlelight, flashing white. That was when I screamed. The sound shattered the rhythm. The chanting stopped abruptly. All 7 men turned to look at us. Their eyes were open now. They were yellow too. Not the whites, the irises, stained the same sickly shade as their clothes, as the walls, as my dreams. Someone grabbed me from behind. The world tilted, spun, went dark. When I came to, I was lying on the cellar floor. The candles were out. The room was empty. Anka was gone. I screamed her name until my throat burned, but only my own voice answered me. I stumbled up the stairs out of the house into the night air and ran. Adults descended on the yellow house the next morning. Someone had found Anka wandering near the fields, dazed, unable to speak. She was taken to the hospital in the city. She never came back to Freidorf. They found the men that afternoon. 7 of them laid out in the cellar, dressed in yellow, dead. The police came. Men in uniforms asked questions no one knew how to answer. The official story was vague, some kind of cult, a mass suicide, ritual gone wrong. The Romanian word nebuni, crazy people, was used often. No one mentioned a child. No one mentioned chanting. No one asked me why my nightgown was stained with dirt and candle wax. The house was sealed. Later it was demolished. A block of flats stands there now, its concrete foundation poured over whatever remains beneath. But the story didn't die. It became an urban myth. People still whisper about the Yellow Men of Freidorf. They say 7 workers disappeared one summer, found dressed alike, victims of a secret sect. They say it was connected to old pagan rituals, to something buried under the village long before Timișoara swallowed it. They don't know the truth. Or maybe they know pieces of it and are too afraid to assemble them. I know what happened. Or at least, I know enough. Anka never spoke again. She lived the rest of her life in institutions, her eyes always unfocused, her fingers twitching as if tracing symbols in the air. She died young. I went to her funeral and stood by the grave, listening to the priest talk about peace and rest, and wondered if she had ever escaped that cellar in her mind. I tried to forget. I left Freidorf as soon as I could, went to university, built a life. But the dreams followed me. The smell, the singing, and the yellow. It wasn't until years later, after the revolution, when archives opened and people started talking more freely, that I learned what the men were trying to do. Freidorf had been built on something old, older than the village, older than the Swabians. The land itself was wrong, layered with beliefs that predated Christianity, that spoke of cycles and offerings and guardians that slept beneath the soil. The men were descendants of those who had stayed. They believed the guardian was waking. They believed it demanded a child. What they didn't know was that the ritual required a witness, someone pure enough to see but not chosen to die. Someone like me. I was there, in that cellar, when the guardian stirred. I felt it, a presence pressing against my thoughts, seeping into my memory. When the men realized I was there, that I had seen, it was too late. The ritual had been broken. They paid for it with their lives. But the guardian was not put back to sleep. It was bound to me instead. That is why I still smell apples and iron at night, why yellow makes my vision blur, why sometimes, in the quietest hours, I hear singing from beneath the city, 7 voices calling my name. Freidorf may be marginal now, a forgotten edge of Timișoara, but beneath it, something old still waits, and it remembers me.